Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. You're watching Niaga AWANI with me, Kabir Aziz. Malaysia's power grid is entering a stress test it was never originally designed for. The surge of AI-driven data centers is not just adding demand, it is concentrating it, intensifying it and making it far more dynamic than traditional consumption patterns. At the same time, the system itself is evolving from one-way power delivery to a two-way data-driven, renewable-heavy network shaped by rooftop solar, storage and cross-border electricity trade. The real question is no longer whether demand will grow, but whether the grid can become intelligent, flexible and predictive fast enough. Because if modernization keeps pace, AI data centers can become strategic grid assets. If it doesn't, they risk becoming systemic pressure points on reliability, price stability and energy security. To discuss this further and deepen our understanding, we take a closer look at what must change technically, structurally, and from a policy standpoint to ensure the grid is future ready. And together with us today is Mr. Jason Ong, General Manager for Asia Gentrack Limited. Okay, Jason, to start off, maybe we want to start by saying that Malaysia is seeing a rapid influx of AI-driven data centers. How is this changing where, when, and how intensively electricity demand shows up on the grid? And why does this challenge the way our grid was originally designed?
Yeah, selamat pagi. So first of all, the AI and data center boom is happening globally, not just in Malaysia. So countries like the US, India are growing by almost 70%, while in this region, Thailand and Vietnam are increasing their number of data centers by more than 50%. And Malaysia itself is adding 30 new data centers on top of the existing 125 they're operating today, mostly across Kuala Lumpur and Johor. Now, each data center requires up to 100 megawatts of electricity and they run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And 100 megawatts of electricity is the equivalent of how much it takes to power 100,000 residential homes or up to 50 shopping malls. So in summary, with Malaysia adding another 30 data centers within the next 10 years, that is the equivalent of an additional 3 million residential homes or up to 150 more Aeon shopping malls. And in the meantime, more homes will continue to be built, shopping malls will continue to be developed. So you can imagine the amount of electricity that the power grid needs in order to deliver, to keep up with the electricity demand. And the Energy Ministry, Petra, they have projected that data centers alone could require more than 20 gigawatts of electricity by 2040. So Malaysia's power system is looking at one of the fastest demand growth across Southeast Asia and facing one of the biggest challenges in history.
Yeah, and traditionally, power grids were built for one-way delivery from centralized generation to consumers. With more renewables, rooftop solar and regional power trade, what structural changes must Malaysia's grid undergo to operate as a two-way intelligent system then?
Yeah, so the grid is becoming much more complex than before. Traditionally, with the one-way infrastructure, you have a group of power plants, they generate and feed electricity into the grid. It goes through the transmission lines and eventually into the homes and the factories and the buildings. But this is not sufficient if you are talking about coping with the current rising demand for electricity due to the rising number of data centers. So we could build more power plants to solve this problem, but that would just bring us further away from our net zero goals. So with the introduction of solar energy, powering the buildings and feeding back to the grid, as well as the adoption of new renewable energy sources such as hydrogen, and also with regional cross-border interconnections between countries, the power grid has to become more modernized in order to cope with the stress of managing the flow of electricity across these new sources of power supply. And the modernization of the grid requires real-time data. It's all about data. Now, ironically, while the underlying cause of the increase in the number of data centers is the massive growth of data and data-driven use cases, the key enabler to balance the demand and supply of energy is the availability of real-time data. Because with real-time data, we can make faster and smarter decisions to manage the volatility and the spikes in energy demand, because real-time data enables what we call predictive balancing. Predictive balancing allows us to dispatch energy that is stored, perhaps in battery energy storage systems that have been powered by solar energy. Predictive balancing allows us to adjust energy imports, and more importantly, it provides us with the ability to promote what we call demand flexibility. Now, if we're trying to achieve our net zero goals only by tackling the supply side of the equation, it is like a dog chasing its tail. It's endless and it's a futile effort. So we need to do more to tackle the demand side of the equation. And ever more important now with the increase in the data centers. So, for instance, we know that the large commercial buildings and industrial factories, they take up more than 70% of the demand for energy. And so for a start, the Naga National or DNB, they provide time of use charging for businesses, making it cheaper for electricity usage during the off-peak hours from 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. on weekdays and full day on weekends and holidays. So this means businesses can shift their power consumption towards the off-peak periods by adjusting the operations accordingly. And this is to help reduce the peak load of electricity, and it also helps them save on energy costs. But I still believe that more can be done by introducing perhaps more pricing layers and more tariff structures.
And now AI-heavy data centers are often seen as major demand risk. What would it take in terms of technically and commercially to turn them into flexible grid assets that can respond to real-time conditions instead of just drawing constant power?
Yeah, so with more real-time data, we actually have more accurate forecasting of power supply and demand, and we can have more robust orchestration of the power grid. It also means that the key stakeholders across Malaysia's energy sector, such as the Energy Ministry, Petra, the Energy Commission, ST, and TNB, they can now have the ability for better planning and decision making, because now there is less room for error with these AI heavy data centers running 24 by 7. Traditionally, the operators, they tend to be more reactive. The problems are only detected when the energy reserves are thin, during surges in electricity demand. It could be outages caused by unexpected conditions such as weather factors or operational issues. So with the availability of real-time data and better forecasting, the operators can now take a more proactive approach by introducing measures to address the risk of these problems before they take place. For example, there are technology solutions out there such as Gentrack that can help the stakeholders and the operators leverage on more effective tariffs and grid orchestration. They can potentially help shift the load away from the non-critical consumption of electricity during supply shortages or during the demand spikes. And this is in order to keep the lights on for the critical consumers, such as these AI-driven data centers, public services, the hospitals, vulnerable consumers, those who are on life support systems. And then there is the introduction of battery energy storage systems that are powered by solar energy. And these can be a good source of power during the peak periods, because energy can then be drawn from them to power the buildings and the houses, and can be sold back to the power grid when it is not utilized. So just to give some examples, in Australia, energy retailers, they have used the Gentrack technology to enable them to bundle their solar panels and battery energy storages as part of their energy plans. So think about it like the telcos and how they bundle the mobile phones with the telco plans. It's the same thing, same use case. So another example in Australia is how energy retailers have used Gentrack to create what we call virtual power plants. So virtual power plants basically a network or aggregation of smaller scale distributed energy resources, such as home solar panels, battery storage, or even electric vehicles. You know that a fully charged electric vehicle can actually power a home for 24 hours. So by the use of technology such as Gentrack, they can help all these distributed energy resources operate as one single flexible power plant. One example is Amber Energy in Australia. They are one of these providers and operators of a virtual power plant through what they call their Smart Shift program. And one last example is in Singapore. One of our customers, Senoko Energy, they offer peer-to-peer energy trading services called SolarShare. It allows their consumers, their customers, to buy and sell electricity with other businesses who also have solar assets. So lots of examples, lots of use cases.
Yeah, and with that, Jason, I guess that is all the time that we have today. Thank you so much to Mr. Jason Ong, the General Manager for Asia Gentrack Limited. Kita akan teruskan dengan laporan seterusnya. Persekutuan Majikan-Majikan Malaysia MEF menyifatkan gesaan kerajaan untuk memperkukuh peraturan dan ekosistem perniagaan sebagai langkah penting ketika persaingan global semakin sengit. Presiden MEF, Datuk Syed Husin berkata, MEF tidak menuntut perlindungan menyeluruh tetapi menuntut persaingan yang adil dan dikuatkuasakan dengan baik. Beliau berkata, usaha kerajaan tersebut mencerminkan komitmen jelas dalam menyokong perusahaan mikro, kecil dan sederhana PMKS tempatan, di samping memastikan Malaysia kekal sebagai sebuah ekonomi terbuka dan kompetitif. MEF turut menyokong pengukuhan dasar kandungan tempatan termasuk memberi keutamaan kepada produk Malaysia dalam pemerolehan awam, penyumburan syarikat berkaitan kerajaan GLC dan rantaian bekalan nasional. Menurutnya, jika syarikat Malaysia tidak dipercayai dan disokong di dalam negara, mereka tidak akan dapat bersaing di luar kerana keyakinan domestik adalah asas kepada daya saing global. MEF turut mengalu-alukan fokus Kementerian Pembangunan Usahawan dan Koperasi KUSKOP terhadap peningkatan produktiviti, pengurangan birokrasi dan penambahbaikan akses pembiayaan. Syed Husin berkata ramai usahawan kecil mempunyai produk berdaya maju dan jenama kukuh namun tidak mempunyai kapasiti kewangan mencukupi untuk mengembangkan skala operasi. MEF komited bekerjasama dengan kerajaan untuk membangunkan PMKS yang lebih berdaya tahan, mampu bersaing dan mampan. Menurut laporan, Menteri Pembangunan Usahawan dan Koperasi Steven Sim berkata, perniagaan Malaysia kini berdepan tekanan berganda. KUSKOP kini mempergiat penyelarasan dengan Kementerian Kewangan, institusi kewangan dan agensi ekonomi untuk mengurangkan kesesakan birokrasi dan memudahkan akses modal bagi PMKS. Seterusnya, isu pelancongan, kesihatan, keselamatan dan integriti pengurusan sukan negara antara yang menjadi tumpuan dalam sidang Dewan Rakyat hari ini. Menurut aturan mesyuarat Parlimen, isu berkenaan akan dibangkitkan dalam sesi soal jawab lisan yang akan bermula 10 pagi. Ahli Parlimen Dungun Wan Hassan Muhammad Ramli meminta penjelasan daripada Menteri Pelancongan, Seni dan Budaya mengenai jumlah dan statistik rumah yang telah dijual kepada warga asing menerusi program Malaysia My Second Home MM2H sejak tahun 2023 hingga 2025. Beliau turut menyoal pengagihan pembeli mengikut negara asal dan berapa ramai peserta program ini telah diberikan kewarganegaraan Malaysia dalam tempoh tersebut. Ahli Parlimen Ampang, Rozia Ismail pula mengemukakan soalan kepada Menteri Kesihatan mengenai status terkini pelaksanaan Sistem Diagnostics Related Group DRG di industri kesihatan swasta. Selain itu, beliau meminta penjelasan mengenai langkah kawal selia kerajaan untuk memastikan syarikat insurans dan takaful tidak campur tangan dalam keputusan rawatan pakar dan hospital swasta tidak membuat tuntutan melampau yang membebankan pesakit. Selain itu, isu akses perkhidmatan keselamatan dan imigresen apabila My Digital ID digunakan sepenuhnya turut dibangkitkan. Ahli Parlimen Merbok, Muhammad Nazri Abu Hassan menyoal Menteri Dalam Negeri berhubung kebimbangan akses bagi golongan tertentu sekiranya perkhidmatan keselamatan dan imigresen mula bergantung sepenuhnya kepada My Digital ID. Beliau menekankan keperluan memastikan golongan warga emas, OKU, penduduk luar bandar dan komuniti orang tidak terpinggir. Sementara itu, Ahli Parlimen Bukit Gelugor, Ramkar Pal Singh meminta Menteri Dalam Negeri memberikan perkembangan terkini siasatan polis berhubung laporan yang dibuat Persatuan Bola Sepak Malaysia FAM. Laporan tersebut berkaitan dapatan Independent Investigation Committee IIC mengenai isu pemalsuan CJ kelahiran 7 pemain warisan Harimau Malaya. Mesyuarat pertama penggal kelima Parlimen ke-15 ini berlangsung dari 19 Januari 2026 hingga 3 Mac 2026.
The insecurity that we're all experiencing, the fact that people are waking up and some new technology is landing on them in their jobs without training, without them having a say. Of course they're going to be anxious. Of course they're going to be feeling insecure about what the future holds. And so I think we really need to stop and say, who are we doing this for? What are the results we want and how do we get there? Well, we get there by including workers in the process.
Whenever you have a new technology coming about, especially a mass of general purpose technology such as artificial intelligence that permeates the economy and revolutionizes the way things are done in every sector of the economy, there's going to be a lot of creative destruction. When the power loom came about, it devastated the fortunes of the handloom weavers who had been very well paid, highly skilled craftsmen. It's hard to imagine anybody nowadays whose life would be better off materially if the power loom had never been invented. And the problem, of course, is making the transition. And that's something where all of society, I think, has to help, mainly just out of basic considerations of fairness and equity.
The challenge we all face, I think each of us here representing very different jurisdictions, is the technologists and the private sector and business is much faster, so much faster than government. That's always going to be the case. And in the age of AI, multiply that by a multiple of 10x, 50x, maybe 100x. So government has really no chance in catching up unless from the beginning, government is going hand in hand in that journey.
Using data from ADP, we found that those in the youngest group, age 22 to 26, in the most exposed occupations, call centers, software, but we ranked all 900 occupations based on their tasks. That age group actually had about a 13% decline in employment relative to before LLMs, especially in 2024 and 2025. We started seeing that effect grow bigger. The older age groups did not have that effect, so the overall effect was fairly muted. And some encouraging information, if you sliced it based on people who are augmenting, using the LLMs and generative AI to augment their work versus people who are using it to automate work, what we found was that the augmenters, those who are learning new things, had growing employment. So they both had more output and more employment, so more shared prosperity. Sadly, that was a minority of the folks, but if we can get more people doing that, maybe that's a potential path.
But a huge part of what has been lost is actually ensuring that the places where most people actually live actually remain integrated into and a crucial part of society. Part of what was real when the middle class was thriving, at least in the United States, is that's where the business leaders lived also. Everybody's kids were going to school together. Everybody had a stake in the success of the same places. And as we've moved to a situation where there's this divergence and you have essentially a thin class of people whose stake is much more tied to that same thin class of people elsewhere in the world, it leaves everybody else behind, yes, in economic terms, but in a broader social sense that you don't solve through redistribution, you don't solve by building the data center. You actually need an economic model in which the incentive is to go back to living and working together.
So you can't sort of talk about this in the abstract. You got to use it. You have to trust it. You have to use it. You have to learn even how to put the guardrails to trust it, right? You can't just be afraid of it. In fact, that's why I think you're going to see that challenge of why am I not seeing immediate results in productivity? Because you have to do the hard work. There could be sector-wide differences, but it's going to fundamentally be because of the leadership will in an organization.
If, I was to talk to a class of undergrads right now, I would be telling them to get really unbelievably proficient with these tools. I think to the extent that even those of us building it, we're so busy building it, it's hard to have also time to really explore almost the capability overhang even today's models and products have, let alone tomorrow's. And I think that can be maybe better than traditional internship would have been in terms of you sort of leapfrogging yourself to be useful in a profession.
I'll go to electricity. I'm not going to do a sports analogy. But I think we've wired the house and turned on the lights. But we have not explained to people that now they could heat the home, they could cook in that home using electricity, they can have entertainment. And so the capability overhead is massive. Even if models improved 0 from today, there is still so much productivity to be had just with what's in people's hands.
I'm constantly surprised, even when I meet economists at places like this, that they're not more of professional economists, professors thinking about what happens. And not just sort of on the way to AGI. The job displacement is one question. We're all worried about the economics of that, but maybe there are ways to distribute this new productivity, this new wealth more fairly. The things that keep me up at night, there are even bigger questions than that at that point to do with meaning and purpose. And a lot of the things that we get from our jobs, not just economically, that's one question, but I think that may be easier to solve, strangely, than what happens to the human condition and humanity as a whole.
I think we as even a global community have to get to a point where we're using this to do something useful that changes the outcomes of people and communities and countries and industries, right? Otherwise, I don't think this makes much sense, right? In fact, I would say we will quickly lose even the social permission to actually take something like energy, which is a scarce resource, and use it to generate these tokens. If these tokens are not improving health outcomes, education outcomes, public sector efficiency, private sector competitiveness across all sectors, small and large, right? And that, to me, is ultimately the goal.
We want to solve all disease, cure diseases, come up with new energy sources. I think as a society, it's clear we'd want that. I think maybe the balance of what the industry is doing is not enough balance towards those types of activities. I think we should have a lot more examples, AlphaFold-like things that help sort of unequivocal good in the world. And I think actually it's incumbent on the industry and all of us leading players to show that more, demonstrate that, not just talk about it, but demonstrate that.
I have engineers within Anthropic who say, I don't write any code anymore. I just let the model write the code. I edit it. I do the things around it. I think, I don't know, we might be 6 to 12 months away from when the model is doing most, maybe all of what SWEs do end to end. And then it's a question of how fast does that loop close? Not every part of that loop is something that can be sped up by AI, right? There's like chips, there's manufacture of chips, there's training time for the model. It's easy to see how this could take a few years. It's very hard for me to see how it could take longer than that.
Over 500 million Africans lack access to a grid, which is crazy in an age where we're talking about quantum computing, advanced AI, and nanotechnology. million people every day are switching on a light, watching TV, charging their phones, having a cool drink from a solar-powered freezer. Easy Solar is on a mission to light up lives and end energy poverty. And our vision is really simple: to make electricity affordable and accessible for all. Sadly, it's not today. My personal journey began really when I was a teenager, and we had rolling blackouts in my household. And I remember the first time I had to study for my high school exams by candlelight because we didn't have anything in the absence of the grid. And I realized how much of a privilege electricity was. And that was really the original spark of trying to solve this problem that was so endemic across the African continent. Technology can be great, but you really have to embed yourself in the way communities think, interact with energy services. So almost every household has even a basic feature phone. They'd sometimes walk a kilometer or two and leave it at the person in the nearest town. And sometimes the phone would get lost, but often they would just get it back at the end of the day. And so, we really tried to understand what are the daily activities people are doing, and then really pricing that cost of the system so that they'd be saving every week, and so that money was in their pocket that they could reinvest in education, reinvest, in a better basket of goods. So people don't just stop with a solar home system, but they can maybe access other equipment that can help them start a business in the future.
One of the biggest lessons through sports is that you can't take your success to your head and your failure to your heart. And that is, I think, very important a lesson in life. I believe cricket, or any sport for that matter, but for me cricket was something that I saw that people can come together for. There can be a lot of differences in your mindsets and your belief systems, in what makes you happy or sad, but when it comes to cricket, especially in Asia, whether you're coming from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, any other country you name, this one sport can gel everyone together. When you're playing sport, kind of appreciate how different characters, different personalities bring so much to that one game and that one team. So understanding that your differences are not necessarily a bad thing. We can work around our similarities, and the differences can really add value to our lives. When we were growing up, there were hardly any women athletes we could look up to, and especially in cricket. I do feel anyone who's taking a path that has not been there before, or they are making a new path for themselves, this thing is very key. It's critical that you make your own community. Sports at a grassroots level gives you an opportunity as a girl to take decisions, to build teams, to be around teams, which a girl who has not been given that opportunity might not enjoy at that age. So for both boys and girls, I think it's crucial that they participate in sports. It's a way to make them learn about collaboration, about understanding different peoples, different personalities. You don't have to be a captain to be a leader. You can be a leader in any form in a sporting team. And that leadership can pave a huge part of the journey.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Cara kita mendapat berita kian berubah. Melalui media sosial maupun saluran digital yang lain serta kaca TV. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini.
Kita buat sesuatu yang berbeza.
Teraskan acuan verifikasi yang diamalkan supaya setiap fakta adalah sahih. Daripada analisis pelbagai sudut yang mendalam, laporan-laporan khas dan perbincangan yang membina negara. Inklusif, suara rakyat kami ajukan. Keseimbangan persepsi kami pastikan. Kerana setiap cerita mempunyai impak yang tersendiri dan perlu dibawa dengan penelitian yang terperinci. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada. Saluran berita paling dipercayai di Malaysia.
Adakah anda usahawan yang sedang menghadapi cabaran dan masalah dalam perniagaan? Kami sedang mencari usahawan yang menghadapi cabaran besar untuk diberi peluang kedua melalui rancangan keusahawanan terbaru. Hantarkan penyertaan anda dengan skan QR yang tertera berserta video berdurasi 1 minit yang menceritakan tentang perniagaan anda dan cabaran utama yang sedang dihadapi. Mungkin ini peluang terakhir anda untuk level up.
Tariffs on imports of products from China reaching up to 145%.
Tariffs on the rest of the world are sitting at 10%, with the potential for reciprocal tariffs to be reimposed within 90 days.
Kunjungan rasmi Presiden China ke Malaysia ini menunjukkan komitmen kedua-dua negara untuk meningkatkan hubungan diplomatik ke tahap yang lebih strategik.
I love you.
Aish! Perjuangan cinta tidak mudah.
Apa foto-foto ni? Apparently, diorang dah kahwin. And I rasa ini cara diorang untuk dapatkan hak penjagaan Adam.
Just buat apa yang saya pesan, insyaAllah semua okey.
Sekejap!
Mampukah mereka mempertahankannya?
Aku tak culik dia lah.
Kalau bukan sebab kau, Niza dah lama give up. Kau ambil Niza pada aku! Minggu akhir, Pak Su Amara di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Assalamualaikum semua.
Assalamualaikum. Terengganu, 7 Februari ini kita beramai-ramai ke Masjid Seberang Takir, imarahkan tazkirah malam Jumaat bersama-sama asatizah di Segani.
Kita cari keberkatan Allah, bawa ke syurga insya-Allah.
Suburkan ukhuwah sekeluarga dengan pelbagai aktiviti istimewa bersama selebriti kegemaran anda. Gandakan amalan di bulan penuh keberkatan dengan Astro.
Minta Allah lancarkan.
Bila bersama lagi jadi.
Racism in Malaysia is not just a social issue, it is deeply entrenched in our institutions and our policy making.
How come every other time there is something that is triggering?
So whenever there is a heavy vehicle collision or a fatality involving heavy vehicles, public frustration often zeroes in on the driver, the lorry driver.
I mean, that's the easiest. Typical pajak business model.
Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Castro. Niaga Spotlight takes us through the week in economic analysis and future affairs. Now today on Analysis, our spotlight is on AI and the future of women in the workplace. Asia Pacific is moving into an AI investment super cycle, with AI projected to contribute up to $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030, and regional AI spending expected to reach $110 billion by 2028. Now, companies are scaling fast. Today, 78% of organizations already use AI in at least one business function. Now, here's the tougher question. As AI reshapes jobs, wages, and leadership pathways, who actually benefits in the workforce? A landmark new report from 9x9 warns that for women, an AI participation gap is already opening. Women still hold only 29% of AI-related roles globally, even as AI expertise commands wage premiums of over 50%. If gender inclusion is treated as an afterthought, the next decade of growth could be built without half the talent pool. I'm joined online by Christine Fellows, co-founder of 9x9, whose research spanned business and HR leaders across Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Australia. Christine, thank you very much for making time this morning. Now, your report is a moment of truth for women in the AI economy. I'd love for you to get started off by telling us a little more about 9x9 first, Christine.
Thank you, Tamina. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. 9x9 is a not-for-profit organization that is focused on Southeast Asia. We're based here in Singapore, but we do research and we provide data-backed evidence around strategies to drive gender equity in the workforce here in Asia. And we believe that it's important for women and men to thrive and advance in their careers, but women have been left behind. So our research is supporting strategies that leaders can undertake to address that gap.
Absolutely. Now, it's extremely timely as well that we get into your report because, as you were referring to, gender equity, we all know about the long-standing gender labor force participation gap, but you're talking about an AI participation gap and saying that it already exists and regression has begun. So tell us in practical terms, what are the type of earliest warning signs or red flags you would tell CEO and leadership role folks to look for inside their own company?
Look, there is a risk that women will be disproportionately impacted by AI as companies start to roll that out. So what I would ask CEOs to look for, or for any business leaders and managers, is as they're starting to undertake AI pilots and starting to build use cases in their organization, have a look at the gender skew of the teams that you're including in those. It's really important to put governance across the workforce share and to make sure you're measuring who is participating, because really in an AI world, who participates is going to benefit. I'd be looking at training. A lot of companies now are starting to do AI fluency training for their teams. I'd be looking at participation of women, seeing if women are dropping off, because the data shows that while women want to learn about AI, when they're asked to do it in their own hours, their caregiving responsibilities sometimes mean they don't have as much time as men. I'd be looking at internal mobility, who is being advanced and promoted into AI-enabled roles in the organization. There's some real signals around that, whose roles are becoming more value add in an AI world and whose roles are disappearing. Just make sure that we measure what matters around that. And the last thing, and probably the most important, I'd be looking for, as you're developing AI strategies, who is leading that conversation? Is there a business leader? Is there a tech leader? I'm sure there is. Where's the HR leader in the conversation? They must have a seat at the table so that they can address workforce impact at the same time that you're looking at the financial and productivity impact.
So if I was a CEO watching this, what's the one metric I ought to be asking my HR lead, perhaps say come on Monday morning?
I'd be saying to them, you need to be in the AI pilot team as we're building our strategies. You need to be looking ahead at what the workforce impact will be from these wonderful efficiency rollouts and expectations we have from AI. And you need to be mapping future skills and what our skills are going to the requirements will be in the future, and how we're going to be upskilling our workforce equally in that regard, just to make sure that women are fully participating in 5 years' time when AI is all across the enterprise.
Basically, this is just early metrics and steps that can be taken so that the HR is not left to count how many women have left the team or left the entire company itself once the programs are done. Good. Let's move on into you telling us a little bit more, Christine, about this double exposure that the report mentions, meaning which women are underrepresented in AI-created roles and overrepresented in AI-disrupted roles. This is a clear, not just an emerging pattern, correct?
Yes, there's really firm data showing that this has already begun, and it's structural. So women in Southeast Asia and in Malaysia tend to be more aggregated in roles that have a higher potential to be disrupted by automation. So I think that the impact of AI across the workforce will be roles will be displaced. They will be augmented, so there'll be AI-enabled roles. There'll be roles that will be created, as you mentioned, and also some roles that are protected. Women are going to be overrepresented in those roles that will be displaced, less likely to move into the AI-enabled roles, and they're deeply underrepresented in the new roles that will drive AI. To give you an example of some of those roles in Southeast Asia, the ones most at risk of automation are administrative and clerical roles, customer service operations roles, junior analysts, any of the roles that require data processing, data analysis, data synthesis, data input. So, admin roles in finance, HR, legal, research, junior marketing roles. So there's quite a lot of scope there for disruption. They are the roles that tend to be more skewed to female workers. The roles that are the big growth roles in the industry are data scientists, data analytics sort of specialists, AI product management, AI infrastructure engineers, automation design, digital transformation leadership. We know, and I think you mentioned the data at the beginning, 29% of the AI roles currently globally are held by women. And that's a talent pool that people are going to start pulling on, and there are just less women there.
Absolutely. And what would you say perhaps is the fastest intervention that might actually change women's employment outcomes? For example, Singapore, on one hand, is also on the Global AI Readiness Index, ranked highest in Southeast Asia, as well as second globally. Is Singapore doing something different, for example, when it comes to this?
They are taking a very intentional and long-term approach, understanding that AI is going to be a transformation process that will affect all areas of business, and it will be very beneficial for the economy potentially, as long as the full population have opportunity to participate. And so they're looking at, and some of the suggestions, I guess, for an equitable and successful investment and commitment, nationwide to AI, would be looking at where are the at-risk roles, where are the skills of the future, how do we provide training to enable large populations of workers to be redeployed. How are we protecting and developing learning time so that all areas of the population have opportunity to be able to upskill and to grow with the AI revolution of the future. And that includes those most vulnerable, which will be women who are going to be more likely to be displaced and less likely to be in the high growth areas, but also the elderly. I mean, the seniors also will have great opportunity. AI is an extraordinary tool that democratizes technology. It gives all people an opportunity to be able to use this technology, in a productive way, without the requirement of knowing how to code. So it's really important that the entire, workforce comes with us on this transformation.
Precisely, and digging a little deeper on a demographic, which is the Gen Z women and the so-called broken career ladder. Now, your report is also pointing to early career roles being thinned out by these AI efficiencies. Now, if that first rung disappears, who will be paying for that redesign? And basically, who will actually be ensuring that Gen Z women in particular aren't left behind?
There's a lot of conversation, and quite honestly, Tamina, it's everywhere in the world at the moment around the challenge with entry-level jobs. Entry-level roles, both for young men as well as young women, are really under threat at the moment because of, a lot of what's happening in technology, and is replacing a lot of those skills we just talked about. However, for women, it's particularly imperative that we find ways to redesign that first rung of the career journey, because we know that there are different challenges for women, and they're already having a tough time getting through that middle stage of career. So if we lose them at the beginning, then they're challenged to be found in the middle and not making it through to leadership. Some of the things that can be done, and there's a lot of thinking going on at the moment, with government workforce organizations as well as companies, around how do we rethink the entry-level role, and how do we redesign that, and make sure that women can come into the workforce and we can build a healthy pipeline. So we're looking at, hiring for learning agility and curiosity, perhaps, instead of, analytical and admin skills. Understanding that the investment
for the conversation so far, Christine. Sorry to cut you off, Christine. Thanks for the conversation so far. We take a quick breather and we'll be right back with the rest of the show. Stay tuned.
Kementerian Pendidikan bertanggungjawab sepenuhnya terhadap keselamatan murid dan pelajar sewaktu mereka di sekolah.
Malaysia dan Korea Selatan terus memperkukuh kerjasama dalam bidang teknologi hijau dan kecerdasan buatan AI menerusi pelaburan dua syarikat utama Republik itu.
SPRM akan meneliti dan menjalankan siasatan sekiranya dapat unsur rasuah dalam pelaksanaan projek Aerotrain di KLIA yang dilaporkan sering mengalami gangguan perkhidmatan.
Melangkah ke peringkat akhir muallim muda.
Inilah finalis yang teguh berjuang.
Islam ajarkan kita untuk berusaha sebaik yang mungkin.
Inilah ujian sebagai ibtila. Sebaik-baik kamu adalah orang yang baik dengan keluarganya. Doa antara azan dan iqamah tidak akan ditolak.
Siapakah bakal dinobat sebagai juara?
Ini bukan macam imam muda lagi. Ini muallim kabir.
Pentas akhir muallim muda. Siaran langsung Jumaat 9 malam di Astro dan Astro Go.
Tariffs on imports of products from China reaching up to 145%.
Tariffs on the rest of the world are sitting at 10%, with the potential for reciprocal tariffs to be reimposed within 90 days.
Kunjungan rasmi Presiden China ke Malaysia ini menunjukkan komitmen kedua-dua negara untuk meningkatkan hubungan diplomatik ke tahap yang lebih strategik.
Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight, still with me, Tamina Rozman. Today, the conversation is centered around AI and impacts on women in the workplace. And I've had online with me Christine Fellows, with co-founder of 9x9, a non-profit based out of Singapore that has just issued a brand new landmark report around this area. So we were discussing the impacts on Gen Z and in particular Gen Z women workers. We move now into looking at external hiring. Christine, so external hiring, particularly with regards regards to AI-related roles is now outpacing internal growth. Now, many firms are going to be saying, we've got no time, we need the AI talent now. What is your response to that?
Look, I would say if you are buying all of your talent in to drive your AI future, there are going to be challenges with integration, with equity losses that will slow you down later. External hiring is also going to drive deeper equity gaps in terms of gender, because women are going to be less represented in that external talent pool. Alternatively, really looking at an internal first approach where you're ring-fencing women from disrupted roles, where you're looking at internal mobility and upskilling, when you're bringing your workforce with you to be able to participate in the AI future. So it's an integrated approach, but the focus on upskilling and development is really key.
Absolutely. So within, let's say, a 12-month window, which is also fairly a long time cycle given the speed of and growth of AI, what would then a gender-balanced AI talent strategy look like for organizations that are willing to take a look at internal first?
Look, I would start with leadership, and I would tie leadership KPIs to internal mobility and to development of their teams. So I would want my leaders to be making sure, firstly, that they're measuring what the gender split is between men and women who are going into the development courses and who are investing in training to make sure that's equitable, but also to be making sure that they're remunerated proportionate to how they are developing their teams. Also then, making sure that I'm identifying, potential women who I can move proactively into the pilots and the teams that are starting to develop the use cases around AI.
Clearly so. So there does need to be a really structured approach around it. Christine, I'd like to dig a lot deeper into something that we did briefly mention earlier on. Now, the report, which is also blunt about these self-driven upskilling models or optional, particularly after work AI learning programs and modules, which a lot of organizations are also coming out with, especially in 2026. However, these underserved women in particular. And what would you say would be maybe the minimum requirements that make such upskilling genuinely equitable moving forward?
Look, I think it is really important that we create programs to educate and upskill our workforce. However, making them available doesn't mean that everyone is going to have time and access to be able to use them. And so there is also a real disproportionate negative impact on women if that's the trading opportunities. What we need to do is protect learning time during work hours. Women have greater caregiving responsibilities generally at home with the elders in the community, and they just don't have free time to be able to spend evenings doing self-driven upskilling and learning modules. We want to create cohorts within the workplace of women where there are sort of safe spaces for women to experiment and learn and share their wins and failures. We want to make sure we track who's enrolling, who's completing, and what the outcomes are of the training programs we offer. But I really do want to stress building communities of women within our workforce. And some companies have done some great work around their women's networks and having, female focused hackathons and areas where women can have fun and experiment and learn AI in the workplace.
Clearly so. I'd just also like to highlight the fact that based on newest figures coming out of the ILO, UNSCAP, it goes to show that around APAC in particular, women may actually be taking on up to anywhere between 2 to even 4 times more unpaid care work, including the whole gamut of childcare, elderly care, being part of the sandwich generation, particularly millennial women also taking on not just their professional roles at work, but also the unpaid care work. And I just had an extended ask on this same line of thinking, Christine. The fact that most employers and organizations around APAC and Asia Pacific are already pretty comfortable with having certain work-life balance programs already made available in the workplace. How can we ensure that perhaps these AI-related upskilling programs also make part of this landscape, and also ensuring that more women are able to avail of them? And just like those work-life balance programs, it's more often than not women taking part in it, men on a much smaller level, which also means then perhaps it impacts your workplace development and your career progression and promotions, etc., in the near future.
Look, the research also talks about women's measured approach to AI and to using AI in the workplace. Women tend to be a little more cautious. They're focused on the ethics of AI. They're wanting the company to give them clear guardrails around the use of AI before they'll use it at work. They're not as inclined to go super fast and experiment and make mistakes. And so these are all really positive attributes, ultimately, when we're looking for ethical, safe AI. However, the culture at work when companies are moving so quickly to roll out AI is often a recognition of who's fast and who's being really, who is most vocal and most obviously using AI. And so that also is not ideal for women. So there's a number of things to be done from an individual perspective. We need to make sure as women, at work, that we are, speaking with our leadership around wanting to be developed and upskilled. We're finding time, we're getting sponsors and mentors in the workplace, and we're building alliances with other women where we can form some great communities of women who are learning and upskilling and developing.
And perhaps some of these networks may even have to be rather informal in the beginning part of things. Moving into looking at measurements, your report also says that this inclusion, gender inclusion in particular, for AI should be monitored with the same discipline as financial and tech metrics. What would you say are a couple of metrics you'd like to see standardized across APAC to track AI equity?
Look, as businesses are starting to develop AI strategies and starting to evaluate what the benefits of investing in this technology will be, they're looking at financial metrics, they're looking at productivity, efficiency, cost savings, and those are the right things to be looking at. In addition, it's very important that we look at what is the participation and what are the equity standards around who is participating in the workforce, who's getting ahead when we do these AI, when we develop AI strategies, and who's advancing the workforce. So some of the metrics: exit rates of female talent, who are we displacing and moving out of the workforce? How are we looking at external hiring versus internal hiring? Internal hiring and moving into AI-enabled jobs. What's the breakdown of gender for those jobs? What's the representation of women in AI governance roles and decision forums? Who's being promoted into leadership in these areas? What's the in the employee surveys, which I know a lot of companies are doing now, just to asking men and women how they rate their own competence in AI, and just to understand who's confident and who's not in their use. So the key is we measure what matters. So we want to make sure that we're really looking at a gender split around all of the human metrics in the workforce as we roll out AI.
And as we look to landing the conversation, Christine, let's look finally at a little bit of the methodology whereby which you'd combine interviews, focus groups across Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia. Now, there is a lot of public AI optimism, of course, but what specific insights perhaps could you share that leadership provided that may have indicated otherwise, at least internally speaking, for organizations?
Look, our research was in Southeast Asia, and across the board, there was optimism about the potential of AI to create efficiencies and productivity in the workforce. That was really across the board. The AI is happening faster than the people systems can develop. And so we use the term building while flying. There's a recognition for companies that they're taking on AI projects and they're testing and they're learning and they're doing pilots all over the company. But there's also a sense that the people metrics aren't in place. HR are not part of that journey. They're coming in afterwards to retrofit. And there's a lack of technical expertise for them to truly be able to participate in that strategic development piece, which is really important if we're going to want to embed equity in our AI transformation.
Clearly, course correcting ought to start right now, actually. Christine, thank you very much for the enriching conversation. Your insights and the report, of course, makes the challenge plain. AI transformation will only deliver real value if gender inclusion is built in from the start. Thanks a lot for your insights. Now, in this AI era, workplace gender representation is a competitive strategy, and organizations must lead the way to ensure women have an equitable share in the evolving future of work. That's all we have time for today. Do join us next week for more economic analysis and insights. I'm Tamina Kaustri, signing off for now.